Hey guys, it's Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of our Powerlifting for the People podcast. If this is your first time stopping by, I'm Coach Gaglione, and I have over 13 years in the field of powerlifting, strength coaching, and just competing myself and coaching others. So today I wanted to talk about kind of training through pain and how do we approach that and things like that. So number one, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm just going to kind of give you some anecdotal experience. And this is something that really it took me a long time to even decide if I wanted to kind of talk about this stuff openly on the internet. But I do get a lot of questions about it, and I wanted to at least give people at least some insight on our approach and how we approach things. So number one, if you do have some sort of actual pain, it's not just discomfort, it's not just like a little, kind of your normal training kind of bumps and bruises. We do recommend seeing a doctor, see a physical therapist or chiro or massage therapist or a combination of them. Clinicalathlete.com is a great resource to find some providers in your area that actually understand strength training. Again, I'm not a doctor, so if you have really some serious issues that you got going on, I would just recommend getting an actual assessment from a professional. So that's number one. So when you're kind of dealing with some sort of discomfort or pain, the first order of business is that you want to kind of assess if it's actually is this soreness, is this just in an uncomfortable position, or is this actually some sort of pain and there's some sort of actual problem? Is this kind of muscle soreness? Is this joint pain? Is there some sort of strain or kind of tear in the muscle? These are kind of things that, as you gain more experience, it could be a little bit easier to answer. So the first thing that you want to kind of look at is your kind of perception of how things feel different when it's unloaded versus loaded. So that's number one. So obviously there might be like a training load that you can tolerate, and then there's maybe a certain threshold where if you kind of go above that, then you kind of feel some discomfort or pain. So a good rule of thumb is to kind of train below that. So that's number one. Number two, is there a range of motion that you can tolerate? So for example, like a deadlift or a bench press or a squat. So a good example of this would be, let me actually go back to the load. So there might be a certain percentage if you want to at max. You get to a certain percentage or certain intensity level, certain RPE, rate of perceived exertion. So just train under that level. So that's number one. Number two would be the range of motion. So something like a board press, there might be a certain range where your shoulder feels better. Box squat is a good example for a squat. There might be a certain box height that feels better on your body. Deadlift, like a block pull or rack pull, is probably a certain height that's going to feel better for your body. The next step would be kind of adjusting the variation. So more load on the spine, so something that's compression based versus traction based. So in the case of a squat, going from like a barbell squat to something like a front squat or high bar squat to something like a goblet squat, and then like a belt squat or even just a bodyweight squat. So there's going to be certain variations, and obviously the variation is going to affect how much load you use as well. But obviously something that's traction based or something that's kind of in front of the body is going to be less stressful than having actual weight compressing in your spine. In the case of like a bench press, going from like a normal kind of bench press to something like a board press like we talked about before, maybe like a neutral grip bar could be a good option for you if it's a shoulder thing. If it's a lower back thing, something like a floor press or a feet up bench would also be a good option as well, kind of taking the lower back kind of out of the equation. Something like a deadlift, like we talked about before, going from like a regular deadlift to maybe like a sumo deadlift or like a block pull or maybe even a trap bar deadlift, or something like we've been playing with a lot, maybe just doing a back extension, which is more traction based, and something I've been doing. We've been actually using a front squat harness and doing good mornings on the Matt Wenning's belt squat machine. So there's different options there, and then even a further level down would be something like a glute bridge or something, which should be like really, low, very, very low levels of spinal load, if any at all. So the variation would be another thing to consider. And then, then you got to look at your technique, actually how you're moving. Are you using good mechanics? And, so looking at making sure you're using good technique. Are you, neutral spine is a big one. So is your spine position changing during the lift? Or are you able to keep a good stacked position with your rib cage stacked over your pelvis? Are you rooting your feet into the ground? Do you have tension in the body? Are you breathing and bracing properly? Are you engaging your upper back and your lats? So being able to hold the neutral spine position is one thing, but then actually able to be active with your trunk muscles So if your lats and upper back are active, if your abdominals and diaphragm and all those muscles are active all around the trunk, and your hip muscles, your external rotators, your glutes are active, those are all going to be good things and going to help kind of, allow you to increase your stability. So that's going to be important as well. When it comes to, you also need to make sure that you're assessing the mobility and the architecture of your body. So you need to use grip width and stance and toe flare and angles of your body that are going to be appropriate for your hips and your shoulder architecture and things like that. So good technique means good technique for you. And I encourage you to check out some of our videos on assessments. There's many ways I would assess your hips and your shoulders specifically to see if you're using the appropriate stance and hip width and grip width for your actual body type. So that's going to vary from person to person. So actually analyzing your particular body type, your movement, and I will say also too, as your weight, if someone has also had a lot of weight loss, that's also going to change their leverages and mechanics as well. Not to say that you can't change your form over time. If you build up more muscle mass and you build strength in certain areas, that could certainly dictate changes in technique as well too. So yeah, we talked about, if you're kind of dealing with some pain and discomfort, and then, maybe like you're getting ready for a contest and you're a high level athlete and you really can't afford to like take time off from training. And then at that point, obviously seeing some other people and then looking at like different tissue methods, which are going to help kind of, just get you in a more parasympathetic, more relaxed state. And a lot of these foam rolling techniques and lacrosse ball techniques and, body tempering techniques are really good for, in our experience, to kind of just allow your nervous system to kind of calm down a little bit and allow your body to realize that it's not a threat to be there. So a lot of these kind of, traction techniques and voodoo floss and these things can really just help kind of allow tissues to kind of calm down a little bit and allow you to get a training effect and maybe kind of work around some of these things. But the main thing we want to encourage is that you never are training through pain or into pain. And also making sure you're getting a good warm-up. So whatever issues you maybe are finding, if you're having trouble with certain mechanical positions, you're drilling those positions in the warm-up and you're refining your technique always. So the biggest thing is always going to be using a technique is mechanically sound for yourself and your body, making sure you're tensioning your body, and then just listening to your body. And at that point, if you're still having problems, again, that's going to be a situation where you want to refer out. We'll include some links in the description, but we're going to literally go over every single joint. So if you have some sort of discomfort in your joint, and I will say, if those joints don't hurt, by taking some of these as precautionary measures, they say like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I got it. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that. So that's going to be really important. So you could use these things as preventative measures as well, even if you're not kind of experiencing any pain or discomfort. Stan Evering talks about this a lot. If you want to train for health, don't compete. And there's a lot of truth to that, although I do like to compete even recreationally. But if you're really worried about kind of being hurt or being injured, there are better things that you could do. But if you do want to compete, just realize that there is going to be a higher level of risk if you are competing versus just training for health and longevity. I think there is a sweet spot where you can have both, and that's something I'm trying to work towards myself. But again, if you're doing something like myself, like I'm working back towards an 850 and 900 pound squat, and there's going to be a higher level of risk associated with that versus just belt squatting or leg pressing. So just realize that you need to do what you love, but I want you to do it intelligently, and I want you to do it the right way, and I want you to be healthy and smart. And even though I really didn't want to kind of touch this injury issue too much, but it does happen, and I do want to talk about it, and I want to give you guys some strategies to kind of combat those things. The other thing I will say, if you're dealing with something that's really serious, like about 7 to 8 years ago, I dislocated my shoulder. Focus on what you can do, not what you can't. So I did a lot of one-arm pressing and one-arm rowing with this arm, and I did a lot of, I was able to deadlift at a certain point, and then I wasn't able to get my arms behind my back for a while, so I was able to actually do a lot of front squatting. So I focused on what I could do while my shoulder healed, and Dr. Elberry was a big part of getting me back to fighting shape for that first injury and then any injuries I've had kind of since then. Knock on wood, I haven't had too many. I've been relatively injury-free and healthy. So, and part of that is smart training and a lot of the things that we talked about in this podcast, and a lot of things we're also going to share on our YouTube channel in the future. So if you are just a podcast listener, you are listening to this on iTunes, make sure you also subscribe to us on YouTube as well, because we're going to have a lot of great informational videos. It's going to be a little bit more specific. We're going to go through every single joint in the body. So if you are having some issues with a specific joint, or you just want to take some precautions, maybe you've had some injuries in those joints in the past, definitely check out the videos and let us know what you think. And if you have any other questions. But that's going to wrap up our podcast for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please share it with a friend. Please give us a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Definitely check out the links below if you want to support the program and it helps us create future content. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay strong, and we'll see you soon.